What do you got for me?
What's wrong with you people?
I got nothing for you.
What's wrong?
You're not David. How y'all feel this morning?
Make war!
I feel rotten. That's how I feel. Well, that was enough for me. We could have had the benediction right there. That was so good.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome to The Reformatory, the podcast for the local church and by the local church, and we are your local churchmen. My name is Josh, and I'm here, as always, with the man, the captain, Jack Barry. Jack, my friend, it's good to see you as always.
Yes.
How are you?
Good. I've heard that the new Captain America movie is kind of a stinker.
That's all I've heard. I've heard the same thing.
Yeah.
I've heard the same thing, but at this point, like, are we surprised?
No, not really.
I'm not.
I'm not shocked.
No.
I mean, I feel like the thing that keeps that Marvel keeps shooting itself in the foot with. I'm sorry if I turned this into a nerd episode, people. I'm sorry, but it has to be said. The leader. Do you remember that character, like from the comics, or like there used to be like a Hulk cartoon back in the 90s? Do you remember that character? He had like the big head, big brain dude.
Oh, yes.
So they teased him in the Edward Norton Incredible Hulk movie at the end.
Okay. Yes.
And then they came out and showed him, and he looks nothing like the comic book. And they teased him to be comic book accurate in a whole bunch of stuff. And I guess they reshot that all and said, nope, psych. So I don't
Marvel's
know,
spinning
dude.
their wheels.
I
They
don't
don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. I don't
know
think
what
they
they're
do. So
It is what it is. Yeah, probably. I mean, I might watch it some Friday night when it's,
it's streaming.
streaming, but
Yeah.
it's not going to be a theater choice for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's. I feel like the days of like the big blockbuster Marvel and the way that whole franchise kind of brought a lot of people together. I feel like that's just kind of. I feel like it's kind of over. I feel like they've just put out stinker after stinker, and people are kind of sick of it.
We'll see how
just me.
Fantastic Four does, maybe.
Yeah. Yes.
I feel like that's the only...
Which you like that in and of itself should say something about the state of Marvel when all your hopes are in the Fantastic Four movie. Like that should tell you where we are right now. It's like we're really hoping Fantastic Four is really good.
The remake of the remake of the remake.
Dude, yeah. The remake number 4 now. It's that should tell you something.
Yeah.
But Jack, I had a great Lord's Day. I'm still like, I've got that tickle in the throat.
Yeah.
I feel like that's just going to be there for months. Like I am
Maybe. It may.
still coughing up a storm. It's sad, but Lord's Day was good. Got to do some music. Absolute dude. Oh man. So I love doing music at church.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. I don't get to do it often because of just schedule stuff. Because of that, like it takes a little bit to get back into the rhythm of stuff, right? So we have currently in our liturgy, we have 5 songs. We sing 3 before the sermon, 1 during communion, and then 1 at the end to close out.
Okay.
I led the first 2 and the last 2.
Okay.
First 2 went fine. Last one went fine. I took the 4th song, Behind the Woodshed, and murdered it.
Oh my gosh, what happened?
I murdered it.
What'd you do?
I bloodied it, dude. It was just like, I don't know what happened, and I have no excuse.
You blacked out?
Because
You're
I'm a
just like...
drummer, and I'm supposed to have rhythm and beat. I could not find the timing on this flipping song. I could not. Dude, I was so, like, after that, I felt so deflated after that song. I'm just like, let's just end this. Let's just get through this. Let's get through this. And then like
Wow.
I butchered it. It was so bad. So bad. And then on top of everything else, this is more tongue in cheek, but on top of everything else, because I'm singing, one of the other elders who did the communion devotional brought me and the other elder that I was leading with. There was 2 elders, dude, on top of it. 2 elders leading music.
Dang.
All right, yeah. We pulled out the big guns, and I screwed the pooch. I messed the whole thing up. But on top of that, right? On top of that, while we're singing the song, the one elder that did the communion devotional, he brought us over the communion elements, right?
Okay,
A little cup and the bread. I'm like, oh, thank you, right? So we all take the bread together, right? And then we all take the wine, and he had mixed it up, and he got me and my elder juice instead of wine.
Ooh.
I was expecting the wine, and that Welsh hit my tongue, dude. And I was like, blah, 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 blah. He comes up afterward. He's like, guys, I'm so he's like, guys, I'm so sorry. I think I mixed it up. I'm like, yeah, wow. I feel like I only took half communion.
Yeah. Wow.
He's like, I know, I'm sorry. It was fun though. And then, but what made the day great is that after service, we had new members classes. We started those up. And it's kind of my rotation to help lead those. And it's awesome, dude. I love new members classes because not only like do I like introducing people who have been coming to the church for a while, like, you know, we introduce them to the church, what we believe, our values, right? We talk about doctrines, things like that. But then I also see like the relationships within the group itself, like start forming.
Yeah.
Right. Like I don't know if you can attest to this or not, but I know I can because I've gone through a couple of them. Okay. There is a very unique and special bond that you get with the people that you go through church membership classes with.
Yeah.
Like you remember like that OG. It's like going through boot camp with people, right? Like you might not be stationed at the same place, but you remember who you went through boot camp with.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's something about that core group where you're like, oh yeah, like we went through membership class together. Like we've got that kind of foundation of the relationship. I just think it's kind of cool when I see those relationships start start forming. But yeah.
No, it's very true. It's it kind of segues into kind of what we did for Lord's Day. Let's see, we continued into Romans 8.
That's right.
Verses 3 and 4. Very good illustration by one of my pastors, by the way. Okay. Solid.
Okay.
He talked about there was a fire a major wildfire in Montana in the late 40s. Mm-hmm. And it was the beginning of what's called smoke jumpers, where firefighters get parachuted into a certain place.
Yeah. They call them hot shots now, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he talked about this one guy who named Wagner Dodge. Solid name. Wagner Dodge.
Dude, that's one of those names that works either way. Dodge Wagner would be equally as cool.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Wagner Dodge, he basically he got into a sticky situation to where they were basically trying to stop this fire from progressing, and he started what he did. He's like, he got all of his guys out of the area, but then he couldn't get out.
Oh, okay.
And the only thing that he had on him was a book of matches. So what he did was he lit a intentional circle around himself.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
To see if the fire could just kind of divert, right?
Yeah.
Since it already had been there, and it worked. He stuck a cloth over his face and just knelt down.
Yeah.
And the wildfire just went over him.
Right over him.
Wild story. So we were talking about the law and gospel, how the law is that fire to the believer. The gospel is that circle that you're in right now.
Yeah.
And the law goes over you because of the sacrifice of Jesus.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
are made justified in him. So yeah, I should say you are proclaimed justified. That's a more better accurate statement. You're not necessarily made justified in him. You're proclaimed justified by God through Jesus' suffering and sacrifice. But
you're made righteous.
Yes, very true.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the right syllable there. Yeah, very dude, that was like a spot on.
I like that
illustration that.
Well, it's got Passover,
very much
vibes to it too. Passover vibes to trying to connect with the young people. But that here comes the angel of death, right?
Yeah,
and you have the blood on the door, and it passes over, and you're saved. Like that's a great illustration. I wonder if he. So my question, my thought when I hear those kind of things is, was that just a story that you knew, or did you Google that? Like, how do you?
One of my pastors had to have Googled that. There's no way he pulled that. There's no way he pulled that, dude.
I mean,
I usually know.
He's like, my grandpa told me the story when I was 8 years old.
No.
He's like, and that's just now coming to.
It was one of my pastors who's Canadian, so he probably wouldn't have never.
Oh, okay.
We're about to have another Canadian pastor, by the way.
Really?
We have an enormous. Okay, so speaking of Canadians, we did our Pastors and Leaders Institute hangout at Buffalo Wild Wings, and we're watching the USA versus Canada game.
Dude,
one of the guys who's an elder candidate.
Did they boo our anthem?
Oh, dude! So one of the guys, I was surprised how many Canadians were there.
Yeah,
there was like a handful, which I was surprised at. But one of the guys right now, who's an elder pastoral candidate, is Canadian.
Okay,
and so I'm like, his name's Pete. I'm like, Pete. Yeah. What are you gonna do here? And he's older too, and he's like, I'm not saying nothing. I'm not doing anything.
Yeah.
And every dude, it was a neck and neck game.
Yeah.
And then finally in OT, I think 8 or 9 minutes into overtime, the Canadians just shellacked us.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So you saw the second one. Yeah. I was talking about the first one. Where we went. Did you see the first one?
Where it was nonstop fights.
We went out there and they booed our national anthem.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
And then it was 3 fights in the first 9 seconds of the game, and we just trounced them. Going to prove, like, if you want to win at hockey, just get mad.
Yeah,
just make us mad, and we'll win. We'll win most things. But no, that's fun. That's fun. So how has your church been receiving the sermons through Romans 8?
I think pretty good we're very in the infant stages in Romans 8.
Yeah.
So it's, we've done the chunks of verses 1 to 2, which are very much foundational, and then verses 3 and 4 add to that even more.
Yeah.
And then are even calling back to chapter 7 as well too. And so I think overall it's been good. I saw a few new visitors yesterday, which is interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think overall it's been good. I think we've had good conversations in the community group that I host as well too that.
Good.
But yeah, we had that. And then we also had a baby shower to go to. One of our, speaking of members that you went through membership class with, this couple went through membership class with us. And so
very cool.
Yeah, they're having their first kid.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The reason I ask is because I'm doing obviously I'm doing our young adults group, which is awesome, right? And we're going through a Christian Basics book right now, and it's written by a couple of Reformed Baptist pastors out of England.
Oh, nice.
And so it's full of it's unapologetically Reformed in its doctrine. There's references to the 1689 paragraphs throughout kind of the entire thing. But what I'm finding is because it is unapologetically Reformed, there's individuals in my small group that aren't Reformed, right? So learning, I'm just thinking back to and it's a testament to God's grace. But actually, something that kind of came up in our membership class too was the first class is always on what is the gospel. That's kind of, we set that kind of primer and that foundation. And obviously the reason that we do that is we want to make sure that we're all starting from the same starting point, right? That our premise is united, and that our foundation is unified, right? Because if you are trying to build on a faulty foundation, anything you build on that's going to tip over, right? So we want to make sure that we get the gospel right. And we do make the distinctions in there between primary and secondary truths, or some will say essential truths, non-essential truths, right?
Yep.
There's however you want to phrase those. And it got me thinking, because that going through that in the membership class kind of brought my mind to the young adults, is that we're going through in this book both essential and non-essential doctrine, right? Primary doctrines, secondary doctrines, right? And I think back to how I was as a Christian back when I was younger, and pretty new into Reformed theology. And I look back to how I would have tackled those topics then versus now.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're getting into, the one that we're going to have tonight after I'm done recording here. We're getting into God's sovereignty and salvation. Last week was talking about total depravity, man's nature, right? And obviously, man's nature, what we believe about that is going to affect what we believe about salvation, how it occurs, how it happens, right?
Yeah.
So it's just, I think it brings up an interesting and an important conversation regarding how you present those truths, right? And how you lead someone through them that has not gone through them before. And this kind of touches on the original reason that the reformatory started was to help Christians, specifically Reformed Christians, avoid the cage stage.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then obviously we changed focuses once you came on, but it's still important to talk about because the cage stage is real.
Yeah. Very
and
true.
And I think a lot of Christians find themselves in it. Jack, how would you define, if you were going to define the cage stage to our listeners? Maybe they haven't heard that before. How would you?
Oh my gosh.
How would you define that for them?
I think a majority would say they've been in the cage stage. Maybe.
Sure.
I can remember being in the cage stage as well too, and it was funny because I felt like it was during my Exodus moment in my life. I had just left the Army and I moved back to Central Washington, so like Ellensburg, Yakima area. Also did some work in Wenatchee as well too. And I started to listen. I think it was just before Joe and Jimmy started Doctrine and Devotion.
Okay. And
it originally came out on YouTube.
Yeah.
So the episodes came out on YouTube and you could listen to them on YouTube that way. I don't know if they had the podcasts up on actual Apple Podcasts yet or not. But they came out that way. And I remember I was listening to a lot of James White, and I was really going through it. I felt like a lot of people, I was in a Baptist church actually too, which a lot of people kind of fueled the fire to my understanding. Because I think at that point, I really didn't take doctrine and theology really very seriously.
Sure.
The first few years of my Christian life. So from about 2006, up until 2015, I felt like I had an understanding of who God is, but I felt like the way in which Mars Hill had handled theology, I felt like I needed to really just figure this out on my own. Because I felt like Mars Hill did not do a great job of teaching us. Mars Hill wanted you to be a Calvinist, and that was about it. And it was very hard to deal with that to a certain extent, at least for me to engage with that. I felt like at that point in my life, I appreciated church from a communal standpoint and from a teaching standpoint and from a discipleship standpoint, but I didn't appreciate it from a theological standpoint or a doctrinal standpoint too.
Sure. So
I think in 2015 is when I really started to become in the cage stage. Like I really started to look at what is a Reformed Baptist? What are particular Baptists?
Yeah.
Especially through Jimmy and Joe talking about that through Doctrine and Devotion.
What were some of the negative ways that kind of the being in that cage stage manifested in your life? Because I've got examples. You're just kind of in this, like it's so new. It's so exciting and it's so like spiritually energizing that you got to keep him in the cage because he's foaming at the mouth and he wants to turn everybody Calvinist, right?
I think I remember I was working at a community college as well too during this time when I was in the cage stage. And I remember like literally it felt like I'm holding the empty weapon.
Yeah.
If you give me the ammunition, like I'm going to go off, like, maybe that's too violent of an explanation. Maybe it's like more along the lines of like anything would set me off. Like if you talked about man's free will, I would have I would have turned into Lou Ferrigno, Incredible Hulk status, going off,
Yeah.
But I think too, you don't really understand those things when you're in the cage stage, nor do you want to know them. You just want to be emboldened and zealous, right?
Exactly.
And so I felt like once I got out of the cage stage and actually knew how to define and understand free will from the Reformed perspective, that really helped me out. But in the cage stage, like, no, anything who says anything contrary to what you are learning right now, you must attack and you must punch and kick your way in order to claim victory. So,
well, and like, the thing is I remember kind of when the Lord opened my eyes to Reformed theology, right? And I'm sure other people can attest to this. It does in some way feel almost like a second conversion. And I'm not trying to over spiritualize it, but what I mean by that is that if you come to a Reformed understanding of soteriology, right? Meaning the sovereignty of God and salvation, your inability to save yourself. In fact, you being at enmity with God and him showing his love in predestining you and bringing you to himself. Once you come to that understanding, it is a different way of understanding the gospel. It is a different way of viewing the gospel. And I'm not going to say I wasn't saved before that, but the gospel becomes new and fresh and real and tangible and so much deeper than God is offering you this gift and you have to choose to take it. Right. And because of how exciting it is, and I remember, it can often result in some zeal and some overzealous individuals that have all of this excitement, all of this knowledge, they're reading all these books, but they don't have the maturity to temper it and put it into the place where it needs to be, right? Which is why I bring up this point is we have to remember, especially as Reformed folk, right? Although the doctrines of Reformed theology are precious to us and they're real, right? And they show God to be sovereign and loving and all these good things. There are many aspects of Reformed theology that are secondary doctrines that we confess wholeheartedly, that we believe are scriptural, that we believe are true, but they are not required to believe for salvation. Right.
Yeah.
So when we're engaging with individuals, especially in our church, in our own church, right? And this is something I've become very acutely aware of leading, groups like this young adults group, is I have a responsibility to not conflate essential doctrines with non-essential ones.
Yeah.
I have a responsibility to teach the whole counsel of God and to teach it faithfully.
Yeah.
It's not that we're going to shy away from total depravity. We did not last week, and there were a lot of like, you could see the wheels turning and the eyes like, oh my goodness, as you start to follow the implications of what it means when it says none are righteous, no, not one, no one seeks after God. Well, what does this mean? I mean, it means what it means, right?
Yeah.
And you start following those implications, and those are hard truths to confront, right? But so it's not that we don't talk about them, but it's important how you talk about them, right? If I'm going to hold, the reformed view of salvation as the essential view, that if you don't believe in the Reformed Baptist understanding of salvation, then you aren't saved, right? I'm doing a disservice.
Yeah.
Not only to, I think, the doctrine, but also to the people that I'm teaching, right? Is I want them to understand the doctrine in the correct context, right? And that's why I do say, hey, like these are doctrines that are important to talk through. They're important to understand, and they're important to dig into. But let's not stake our salvation on our understanding of total depravity or predestination, right?
Yeah.
Because there's going to be Arminians in heaven. Now, granted, they're going to be inconsistent Arminians, right? Which we're all thankful for the inconsistencies, right? We have them, right? But yeah, like, it's not the bar for salvation is not Calvinism, right?
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that, especially when you're new into Reformed theology, is that, we cannot make the mistake of raising, these doctrines to the level of the gospel, even though I do believe that, when you're on the other side of the door, right, I agree with Spurgeon, Calvinism is the gospel. Yeah. And what what that means is it explains the gospel. It shows the gospel. It reveals the gospel and how wondrous and glorious it is, right? Yeah. But on the other side of the door, you can see how that statement would be like, what are you talking about?
It's kind of I've been waiting to pull this analogy and illustration out. You remember the great 1990s Peter Pan movie Hook?
Yes, Robin Williams. Okay. Dustin Hoffman.
Dude, when Robin Williams Peter is with the Lost Boys and they're all eating imaginary stuff. What are you doing, man?
Yeah.
Come on. Like eat. He's like,
it's delicious.
What?
Yeah.
I feel like to a certain extent, that's how a lot of people feel before they go in the cage stage. And then after they go in the cage stage, it's that moment where he sees all the food and the feast.
Yes.
What was the line? Analogy. I can't remember. You're doing something, Peter, or something like that. I can't remember the line. Anyway, I needed to pull that illustration out somehow, some way. I've been thinking about that for like a couple days now. So, but
I mean, it is, and that's honestly, I think, kind of how it feels is at the beginning. And look, that's kind of, I think, the best place to land is remember when you are teaching these doctrines, right? Or when you're walking someone through them, remember that it was the Lord that revealed them to you. It wasn't your intellect.
Yeah.
Right. It wasn't your ability. It wasn't you. It was the Lord graciously revealing his truth to you through his word. Right. I feel like often we forget that when we're the ones that are teaching it. It's like, well, it was revealed to me through grace and time and patience, but I'm going to reveal it to you by keeping your eyes open with toothpicks, and I'm going to ram it down your throat. Right. Because that's how it's going to happen. Right. And we forget. Yeah. We forget that these truths, they're wonderful. They're worth digging into. They're worth teaching. They're worth believing in. But they're given by grace, and they're given when God says he wants the person to have it. So just be faithful and don't be cagey. Don't be angry about it, right? Don't be someone who's preaches the doctrines of grace ungraciously, because There's a lot of that going on these days. And an
Oh, yeah.
ungracious Calvinist is amongst one of the greatest oxymorons that exists.
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I feel like that's probably a good place to land. The
Yeah.
fact that an ungracious Calvinist is the biggest oxymoron that I've ever heard of. So, yeah, it's man, I thought I thought of an article of some article. I know it might have been J.I. Packer. It might have been like an old school theologian talking about when God makes a Calvinist or something like that. I can't remember. But anyway, my mind is rummaging through old articles and stuff like that. But
well, it's probably time to get out of here then.
It's true.
We'll take it to the Patreon.
Yeah. Anyway,
take us out of here, Jack.
I will take us out with my rummaging and my old mamness that I'm pulling out right now. If you appreciate Josh and I's attempt to make the local church central into the believer's life, especially when it comes to walking through the doctrines of grace, as we so eloquently like to call them, and maybe you have questions about the doctrines of grace or want us to do an episode diving deep further into the doctrines of grace, which we might do. You never know. You can follow us on the sociables. Yes, those dastardly little things. You can send us a direct message about an episode idea you might have, some questions for Josh and I, anything along those lines. You can find us on the Facebook, the metaverse, if you will, the Instagram, as well as the chocolate marshmallow, or the always interesting sociable, formerly known as Twitter X, if you will. All at the tag at Reformatory Pod. Josh, you can tell the lovely people how they might support us in our endeavors.
Well, if you do appreciate our attempts, as Jack said, to make the local church central, the life of the believer, and to keep Christians out of the cage stage, the original mission of the Reformatory, way back when. You can support us in multiple ways. We do have a YouTube. You can head on over there and watch the episode as well as listen to it. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the little bell for notifications, as the kids say. We appreciate that. You can hit the link in the description of this episode and buy some shirts, buy some merch. I was actually working on a new design just the other day, so we should have some new designs hopefully dropping here pretty soon. We'd appreciate that. You can like and review this podcast on Apple and Spotify. That always helps out. Last but not least, we have a Patreon for $5 a month. You could head on over there, have access to these episodes early, have access to any exclusive content, including merch, early before everyone else, and you get multiple bonus episodes every week. It's a great deal, and there's some really, really cool people over on the Patreon. I'm just saying. Make sure to head on over there and enjoy them for $5 a month. And if you do so, our pledge to you is your name shall be hallowed.
Hallowed, sir. Hallowed.
Hallowed through the halls of the podcast. That is our pledge to you. We thank you all for listening, and we will catch you on the next step of the Reformatory.